Okay, class, lecture number 6. I hope you're keeping up with your material, staying abreast of it. You have an examination coming up very shortly here, folks, right after your lecture 8. All right, the last time we were together in class, we talked about a lot of things, as we always do. I mentioned to you about the period of time of absolutism and the number of wars that we had there. Many of these wars associated with the French king, Louis XIV, the Sun King, as you recognize. We've talked a lot about him anyway. And I mentioned to you about the 9 Years' War that took place there, the League of Augsburg, the War of Spanish Succession happened to be another one of those wars. We went to Prussia, so to speak, and mentioned a number of the leaders there, Frederick William I, and Frederick William I, drill master of Europe, you know, the sergeant king, the soldier king, interesting individual there, huge in size, by the way. His son, Frederick II, are also known as Frederick the Great, another individual. And he ended up invading Silesia, which created a war with Austria. And of course, this is the War of Austrian Succession. He became very familiar with Maria Theresa, who was the empress, if you will, of the Habsburgs, of the Austrian Empire. And then one of my favorite individuals is that of Catherine the Great. I love Catherine the Great. And anyway, it's always fun to go to the Winter Palace, the Hermitage of St. Petersburg, and just imagine yourself during the times of Catherine the Great. And I mentioned the Hermitage again just in a little bit. All right, we mentioned the 7 Years' War that took place, reoccurrence of bubonic plague, other diseases at that time. And I think in the closing parts of the class period, we talked about potatoes and maize, which will add to the European diet here. And controversial, but nonetheless, it feeds those hungry mouths of those Europeans. All right, folks, if you're following along today, I'm on page 536. And we're going to go into 2 more exciting events here, folks. And these are events that took place in the latter parts of 1600s and then all of the 1700s. And those events are referred to as the scientific revolution and the Enlightenment, you know. So I hope you enjoyed the lecture today, and let's go to our document scanner here, folks. All right, and here we go with this. And like I mentioned to you a second ago, these 2 events here, scientific revolution, the last half of the 1600s, age of enlightenment, all of the 700s. All right, now there's several premises behind this that we need to recognize. This was an age of intellectualism, and it's very different than that of the times that we had with absolutism and just the monarchies that we had at that time. And one of the things that they were going to do, that they did do here, for the intellectuals, they rejected all past knowledge. And I'll share with you a quotation here from Immanuel Kant: dare to know. Dare to know. You don't have to rely on someone else's thinking. Dare to know. Develop your own values with this. And another thing that we had as a premise of this period of time is that knowledge is valueless unless you can put it to practical use. Knowledge is valueless unless you can put it to practical use. And the third thing here, and I like this very much, if we were in class we would have fun with this for the time being here, is demystification of the universe. And what I would ask you at this time in class, and I would point to a couple of you, and then if you're in class, you ought to do the same. If you happen to be on the web day, then it'll be different than that. But do you believe in ghosts? Do you believe in hobgoblins? Do you believe in goblins and pixies? Do you believe in werewolves? Do you believe in banshees here? Do we believe in witches and wizards? And that's what these intellectuals at that time are going to do, is demystification of the universe. Those monsters, so to speak, exist on the storybooks or on the stories that are related to you. So back we go here, folks. All right, so anyway, now, this intellectual thought is brought about by a couple of things here. Discovery of the New World. This gets people from thinking out of the box. And the other one, and this is so significant here, as the Earth actually revolves around the sun. Now, I would ask you in class here, folks, do you believe that the Earth revolves around the sun, or does the sun revolve around the Earth? And you would probably tell me, oh, the Earth and the planets revolve around the sun. And my next question would be, how do you know that? And your answer would probably be, because my teachers told me that. Well, that doesn't necessarily prove anything to me. All right, now some of the individuals associated with this, and I want you to recognize these individuals here, but one individual who's known as Nicholas Copernicus. Nicholas Copernicus, you probably heard of him before. He is from Poland. He's from He's a Pole from Poland. And anyway, in fact, if you go to the city here of Warsaw, you can see a statue there of Nicholas Copernicus right there in the market square itself. And here's an article here that I would have out for you good folks and in class, where you could read this article and kind of get an idea of what Copernicus actually looks like. There he is right there. And Copernicus took a differing view than most of the scientists and certainly religious figures of that time. And he opined, so to speak. Let's see if I can get this down here. Anyway, there we go, Nicholas Copernicus. And he did this in his book that he wrote in 1593, which was called Revolutions on the Heavenly Spheres. I don't draw very well, but what he's saying here in this book is that the Earth and the planets orbit the sun in concentric circles. And that's what I was trying to draw for you folks here. We'll say this is one planet here, and orbiting the sun here in a concentric circle. And then we have the second, that is here, second planet, that is orbiting the sun in concentric circles. All right, and of course this went very much against the thoughts of the Catholic Church at that time, who did not accept Copernicanism. All right, let's move on to another individual here from that period of time. In fact, if you go to the city of Prague, which is located in the Czech Republic today, you can actually see the burial site of this individual there. It's in one of the churches there off Wenceslas Square. And this individual's name is Tycho Brahe. Tycho Brahe. And he differed from that of Copernicus' ideas. And he believed that the planets orbit the sun, but then the planets and the sun orbit the Earth. And of course, we do not accept that premise today. He's from Denmark and literally drank himself to death. That he is buried inside one of those churches there on Wenceslas Square. Another individual, I like this individual very, very much here. His name is Johannes Kepler, just like Jonathan. Johannes Kepler, and he differed from Copernicus in that he believed that the Earth and the planets orbit the sun, not in concentric circles, but in elliptical paths. And I've tried to draw this out for you, such as we take the first one here, and this is like an elliptical path. It's not a circle. Here's the second planet here, like this. We have the third planet that's going around like this. All right, and so that was considerably different than what Copernicus had advocated. That. All righty, and this is, by the way, what we accept today here. If you get a chance to go to Prague, which is in Bohemia in the Czech Republic, not very far from where Tycho Brahe is buried in that church, you can actually find the apartment, the old house apartment, if you will, of Johannes Kepler. All right, neat place to visit, by the way. All right, another individual here, Galileo Galilei. This is a little bit after that of Copernicus and Kepler. And Galileo Galilei at the University of Padua, anyway, which is located in Italy as we know it today anyway, wrote The Starry Messenger. And in fact, he was supporting Copernicanism, and the Catholic Church actually placed him under arrest and accused him of heresy. I don't know if he actually would have been burned at the stake or whatever the case is. But he recanted his story, and he said, I just made all of it up anyway. And the Catholic Church, in turn, confined him to house arrest, for the rest of his life. And as he was going to his feet, he was lying prostrate in front of the church officials, and as he was going to his feet, he muttered under his breath, "Pussy move, it moves. It really does move." All right, but anyway, and that is Galileo. If you visit Florence, Italy today, and you go into the Church of the Santa Croce, where Michelangelo is entombed there, where Machiavelli is entombed, you can also find the burial site, the resting place there of Galileo. Okay, Galileo also used a 30-power telescope to view the moons of Jupiter, and I'm talking about the moons here of Io and Europa and Ganymede and Callisto. There are actually 12 moons on Jupiter. Jupiter is a wonderful, wonderful observation, folks. If you have a spotting scope, you can even see, you can actually see the moons if your eyes are sharp enough with a naked eye. You certainly see them with binoculars. If your challenge number one, you have to find Jupiter. But if you have a spotting scope, a telescope, and you spot Jupiter, it has a really, really neat appearance there, seeing all of the 12 moons, or many of the moons, that are orbiting about Jupiter itself, the black spot that's on Jupiter. And oh, by the way, if you're going to do that, take the time to try to locate Saturn. And there's nothing more amazing than using your spotting scope and seeing the rings of Saturn here. All right, sorry about the astronomy lecture for today here. All right, so back we go here, folks, and we'll pick up some more current scientists in this scientific revolution here. An Englishman by the name of Sir Francis Bacon, and he wrote this piece here, which is called Novum Organum. That's Novum Organum, the new instrument. The new instrument. And one of the things I like about Francis Bacon, and I firmly believe this, it's one of my philosophies here, folks. Knowledge is power. And I firmly believe that knowledge is power. And right now in our country, maybe I'm wrong on this. I'm an academician, and I firmly believe it's just a classroom education. I believe in old-fashioned education too here, folks. And I believe that knowledge actually gives you power. I believe in liberal arts education, and many in our country today feel like that is not the proper way, that we should have vocational education, learn a trade, learn a skill, and that's fine for some people, and I'm not really against that. But I'm first and foremost a believer in liberal arts education. Knowledge is power. We get power from reading, power from learning here, and that gives us knowledge, and it gives us a foot ahead of many other people that haven't received a liberal arts education. And that probably stepped on the toes of a few individuals with that. Sir Francis Bacon. And then one of my favorites here, during the same period of time, and by the way, Sir Francis Bacon believed in empirical knowledge. Knowledge is gained through observation and experimentation. Knowledge is gained through the senses. But another individual, and I like him very much here, is a person by the name of René Descartes. Now, this is the way you want to pronounce it there, Descartes. All right, and he'll contribute to what people refer to as a Cartesian thought. And he wrote this piece, which was called Discourse on Method. And never receive anything unless you absolutely know it to be true. And that's what I was alluding to just a few minutes ago, when we were talking about Copernicus and his ideas that the Earth and the planets orbit the sun. And I said, how do you know that? And the answer that you probably would give me is my 6th grade teacher told me so. And I don't know if I'm happy with that answer there, folks, And what Descartes is saying is never believe anything unless you know it to be absolutely true. Doubt everything until you can prove its existence. And one of the favorite sayings of Descartes, cogito ergo sum. And you can learn that in Latin if you wish to do so. What it translates to mean, I think, therefore I am. Cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. And one of the things that Descartes advocated here, that reality, that life exists, and let me get this position where you can actually see it because you can't see that right now, is that life exists, reality exists in two forms. It exists as mind, or it exists as matter. It is one or the other, or it is both here. Mind is reserved for human beings. Everything else is made of matter. Man is nothing but a machine with a mind. Man is a machine with a mind. All right, now like this. So we have Baconian thought and Cartesian thought here. So let's see here. I think I have a couple of photographs I want to share with you. This is a photograph. It was taken in Paris. If I can get the light properly positioned on this. And if you go inside that church here, folks, you can find a resting place there of René Descartes. It is in this church right here, which is called the Church of Saint-Germain-des-Prés. All right, so anyway, and that is a resting site there, right in the central parts there of Paris itself. Okay, so let's move right along here, folks, and see who else we might need to talk about for this period of time. And this was a scientific age. Some of the scientists that will emerge out of this time, back when I was a biology instructor and taught anatomy and physiology, I always required my students to remember William Harvey, if I can get it up here where you can read it anyway. And William Harvey was the first to describe blood circulation. Up until that time, scientists just thought that if you cut yourself, that gravity just pulled the blood right out of your arm or leg and just dripped down because of gravity. But William Harvey actually described blood circulation, and I'm not trying to make anatomists out of you folks, but blood is pumped from the heart, it's pumped into arteries, it narrows into capillaries, which has not been discovered at that time. That's where the gas exchange takes place. And then we now get oxygenated blood or deoxygenated blood, which transports blood in veins and carries them back into the heart and whatever. And then it's pumped out again here. All right, it will be not until the next lecture here, folks, where I actually tell you who discovered capillaries. But William Harvey described blood circulation. Might want to make a little note of that. Some of the other scientists of this time here, I can remember when I taught anatomy and physiology, we always spent time addressing the topic here of Boyle's law. It was developed by Robert Boyle. Some of you probably have memorized it through a formula. I don't like to use that, but the pressure of a gas varies inversely with its volume as long as we have constant temperature. It is known as Boyle's law, developed during that period of time. And if you were taking my anatomy and physiology class 20-something years ago here, folks, I would demonstrate that through the use of a balloon, through the use of my hands. Okay, another individual, also a scientist from that period of time here, is Robert Hooke. Robert Hooke was the first to describe cells, and he was making observations and was able to observe plant cells. So Robert Hooke, another scientist. We mentioned Blaise Pascal before. He made observations of probability theory here. He developed the world's first calculating machine. These are all scientists from this period. Now on we go here, folks, and considered to be the greatest scientist of this period of time that we're talking about, Sir Isaac Newton. He's an Englishman, by the way, Sir Isaac Newton, and contributed a number of things to science here. Optics. In fact, he developed optics as an empirical branch of physics. For those of you that are taking calculus now, you can thank Sir Isaac Newton for this. He developed a mathematical system of calculus. And we also had the greatest contribution, Sir Isaac Newton, is that of universal gravitation. And let's see here, and that'll be about it for that. Universal gravitation, we all understand that. You know, the Earth does not like you to leave its surface. Okay, so let's move on. We're going to go into a different section here, folks. And this section will deal with the Enlightenment movement. It is a 18th century phenomena. That means it is the 1700s here. And let's go through a few of the ideas behind the Enlightenment. And I'll tell you right now that the Enlightenment will affect Europe. It is mostly in France and mostly in England. And later it will go to the United States, but not at this period of time. It will be another 100 years just about before it moves into the United States. And anyway, but we'll share a couple of premises here. The entire universe is completely understandable, and this can be explained through natural rather than supernatural forces here. And we do not have the supernatural forces according to the Enlightenment. All right, even though I watched a movie last night that was a documentary on poltergeist, but anyway, and we'll pretend that just did not happen with that. All right, let's see a couple other things we have here in association with this. Let me get this up here. Absolute adherence to the scientific method. Absolute adherence to the scientific method. As a scientist myself and a historian, I firmly believe in this. I use it every day. It's completely unrelated to science. But let's follow the steps here. And if you're taking a biology course now, your instructor should anyway introduce you to the scientific method is what I'm trying to say. I'm sorry, I couldn't get that out. Number one, we make an observation. Number two, we follow this with an hypothesis. 3, we test our data. 4, we create a control. 5, we draw a conclusion. All right, I'll give you an example of this, folks, and this is the example that we do use in class. One of my hobbies is that bird study. When I was in graduate school as a biology graduate student anyway, I developed a study and fascination with birds, and ornithology became my primary interest in biology. So let's just say, for example, here that I'm looking out my window and I see a red bird fly by. So I make the observation, and I want to identify what this red bird is, so I make an hypothesis. And my hypothesis is, I believe it's a cardinal. I believe it's a cardinal. But hold on. I have to test my data here, and I think about this for a second here. Could be a summer tanager. Summer tanager is also a red bird, but I realize that this is in November, and by being in November, you know that summer tanagers, as the name implies, they're migratory birds. They're not here. So I've tested my data. Now I can draw a conclusion. So what is my observation? What did I see? And I saw a cardinal. So that's a scientific method for you here, folks. And like I say, you don't have to just use it for science. You can use it for many, many things in your life. Okay, so let's move on here. In the third part of this, and I like this part too, and let's see if I can get this down here in the third part. The entire race can be educated to an infinite level. The entire race can be educated to an infinite level. Did I write it out? I did write it out for you. And to illustrate this, I'll use an example here by John Locke. John Locke, who wrote this essay concerning human understanding here. And when the infant is born with a brain that has no data. There's no data whatsoever. It's an empty flash drive. It's an empty hard drive. It's an empty notebook, a blank notebook, blank page of paper. And so we have to add to this. And we add to this through experimentation, through education. The parents teach the child, and the child begins to learn. And according to the Enlightenment movement here, we can be educated to an infinite level. There is no cap upon this. Unfortunately, some people don't believe this, and they cap their education like with a high school education, and they don't get a full college education here. And I believe firmly that you learn for an entire lifetime. It's a lifetime process. I never get tired of learning, and I know you don't want to hear about me, but there's always another book to be read. There's always another language that can be studied. There's always, English literature, American literature, stories that you can go back and read. There are puzzles that you can work. We can always expand the mind. And unfortunately, not a lot of people agree with me on that, but I firmly believe in that. Okay, so the human intelligence can be educated to an infinite level. All right, let's see what else we need to talk about here, folks. And I want to go to France. We're in the Enlightenment here, folks. So I'm going to talk to you about a number of these Enlightenment thinkers from this period. And we're going to start with France, and then we're going to go into England. We'll probably get through those today. We'll not have a chance to get into the German intellectuals of the Enlightenment period today. But anyway, France. And France was premier with that. And a person that we so closely associate with the Enlightenment period here in France is a person by the name of Voltaire. And I'll give you a likeness here of what Voltaire appeared as. He is an intellectual. There he is right there. And I have to tell you a little story about this. This is a statue of Voltaire, and it's present in the Hermitage. That's where the museum is, next to the Winter Palace in St. Petersburg. And I knew that statue was there. By the way, it's a rather large statue. It's like life size. And I knew it was there. Occasionally we have photographs of this statue that's present in the textbook, not in this edition of your textbook, unfortunately. And my last trip to St. Petersburg and going through that museum, for another time, I wanted to see this statue so much. And I asked a tour guide about this, and the tour guide said, well, they keep the statue hidden off in a separate room that's not open to the public. And I was so disappointed with that. And we went through a couple more rooms there in the museum, and finally I felt a tap on my shoulder. And the tour guide, she said, come with me. She was Russian, and she said, come with me. And she led me off to that special room, and lo and behold, there was that statue there. Voltaire, and I could not believe that. I was the only one in the tour group that she allowed to participate in that. And you probably care nothing about that, but it was a memorable event for me. Anyway. All right, so let's move on here, folks. I want to show you some other things about Voltaire, because we're going to be with Voltaire for just a few minutes here. If you get a chance to travel to Paris, if you go over to the left bank, you probably heard of the left bank. That is on the, I guess it would be the south side of the Seine River there. You can see Le Voltaire. And this was a boarding place. This was a boarding home in which Voltaire actually lived during the times here of the Enlightenment period. All right, so anyway, that's kind of neat there. That's at 27 Quai Voltaire. Vincent, if you say it in French there. All right, now, Voltaire was, did I write it for you here, folks? Here we go. Voltaire is a personification of the Enlightenment. He was a prince of the philosophy. That's the way you'll see this on your examination in the matching section there, trying to pair those, if you will. But he wrote philosophical letters, and philosophical letters had the themes of religion and political liberty, freedom, in other words, with that. All right, Voltaire, at an early age, insulted a pompous French lord, and he was sent spent for a period of time in the Bastille. You don't know what the Bastille is now, but I promise you in the next lecture or so here, folks, you're going to get very, very familiar with the Bastille. You will not see it today. It is not there in Paris, but at that time it was, and he was in prison there for a period of time for insulting this pompous French lord. Later he was sent to England, and he stayed in England for, I believe it was 3 years, and he loved the English people, and he filled himself with bacon. If you understand what I'm talking about with Francis Bacon. So when he came back to France, he was full of Baconian thought and also Cartesian thought. All right, so let's move on with Voltaire, because I've got a lot of quotations I want to share with you about Voltaire. And here's one of the best-known ones here. And Voltaire, by the way, was he believed in the rights of civil liberties, and his motto or battle cry was this French phrase here, which is called "Écrasez l'infâme." Écrasez l'infâme. Crush infamy. And if you don't know what infamy is vileness, evilness here. Crush all forms of repression, fanaticism, and bigotry. All right, so anyway, that's with Voltaire. One of my favorite quotations here from Voltaire, and I'll say it to you in French here, folks, and I use it all the time. And if you just think about this, it just makes sense here, folks. And we'll say it in French here: les sins communs ne pas communs, les sins communs ne pas communs, and we'll translate it here, folks. This is from Voltaire. Common sense is not so common. Isn't that correct? Les sins communs ne pas communs. Impress your friends. Memorize that here, folks. Common sense is just not so common. All right. He also wrote this piece, which was called Candide. Candide. This is about the hapless, it's a satire. It's about the hapless Dr. Pangloss and just suffering one misfortune after another misfortune here. Let me share some quotations with you from Voltaire. And Voltaire is not an agnostic by any means here. I'll share some of these quotations. God is a comedian playing to an audience too afraid to laugh. And I think that is very, very true. The individual who persecutes another individual because he is not of the same opinion is nothing more than a monster. All right, I'll do another one here. I do not agree with a single word you say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it. And I firmly believe in that here, my friends. Unfortunately, in the United States today, that's not accepted by a large number of individuals there. They're unwilling to even listen to the other side. It has to be exactly what you think. They believe in free speech, but only for them, and it's not for the other side with that. All right, here's another Voltaire for you. The less superstition, the less fanaticism. The less fanaticism, the less the misery. It is dangerous to be right when the government is wrong. And I love this, and this is very, very good here, folks, and this will be my final quotation here from Voltaire. But think about this, and I want you to think about this in the way that we describe those religious wars there, and that was back during the Iron Century. Christianity is the most ridiculous, the most absurd, and the bloodiest religion that has ever infected the world. And if you stop and you think about it, isn't that the truth? And it is the truth with that, too. Not being discrediting Christianity, but it is just about the truth with that. All right, let's move on with some of the other individuals and French individuals here writing the Persian letter and the spirit of law, the Baron de Montesquieu. The Baron de Montesquieu here. All righty here, and let's see here. We're going to move on with some other individuals here. I will test you on this individual, absolutely for sure. This was the greatest piece of work that came out during the Enlightenment period. And the individual, let's pronounce his name properly here, folks. The individual is known as Denis Diderot. Denis Diderot. And he wrote Encyclopedia, if you can imagine that. Encyclopedia, 17 volumes, 11 illustrated plates. You know what encyclopedias are, I guess you do anyway. Maybe you've seen them. Some households still have encyclopedias there. But 17 volumes, 17 illustrated plates with that, you know. And he thought people would actually read it for entertainment. And he found out that people were taking encyclopedia and they were using it for research. An amazing piece of work with that, too. And I want you to think about this for a few minutes. I want to show this to you. And here, I'll put it down here so you can actually see this. But I'll read it to you likewise here. There we go. And under the section here of Eucharist, and you know what the Eucharist is, that's the Lord's Supper, he cross-referenced this, see cannibalism. Now just put a few minutes of thought into that. Eucharist, cross-reference, see cannibalism. And I won't comment on that further. I'll let you do your own thinking. All right, another individual, a Frenchman, Marquis de Condorcet, outline on the progress of the human mind. And he believed that as average intelligence increased, that we would find life expectancy to likewise follow suit with that. All right, he also believed that tyrants and slaves will exist only on the stage or in history. Okay, another individual, and this is a Frenchman here. All right, his name is Jean-Jacques Rousseau. One of my favorite individuals here, folks. He did not fully accept everything in the Enlightenment, but he accepted much of the Enlightenment. All right, Jean-Jacques Rousseau. And anyway, he wrote this, he wrote about education. He also wrote about political theories here. And education, one of his most favorite pieces here is Emile. The first impulses of nature are almost always right. Children should not be treated as miniature adults, but children should be allowed to develop normally. And where my favorite one comes in is this one here, the social contract. I don't know if you can read my writing there, the social contract. Yeah. Let's see, did I write it down for you folks here? And we're going to spend a few minutes on this in class here. And this is a quotation that comes out of it. And I love this quotation. Humans are born free, but everywhere you are in chains. I hope you believe that. Humans are born free, but everywhere you are in chains. You may be sitting in my class or sitting here watching this video production here, folks, and you don't have to do that. You don't have to do it at all. You can get up and you can leave my classroom. There'll be penalties if you do that. You can turn this video off right now and just go in and sit down with your favorite beverage and just ignore this video entirely here. Walk out your door. Leave your parents' house here, folks. You're born free, but everywhere you're in chains. If you don't watch this video, you'll have a serious reaction to that. If you get up in the middle of my class and walk out, there'll be a serious reaction to that, and that'll come from me. And it also means that you're going to create an image in my mind that I'm not going to forget about you, too. And we have this with everything in life here, folks. Leave home. Go out and be on your own, but you're in chains. You're going to be tied down. Don't want to pay your income taxes? Don't pay your income taxes. You're born free. But if you don't pay your income taxes, guess what happens to you? You're going to be arrested. You're going to be fined. So everywhere we are born free, but everywhere we are all in chains. Shall we move right along here, folks, as we eat up our class period here, and I need to move along with that. Now, an English philosopher from the Enlightenment period, Mary Wollstonecraft. You can see a likeness of her in your textbook. Her daughter was Mary Shelley, and you probably heard of Mary Shelley and that of Frankenstein. But Mary Wollstonecraft wrote this piece of Vindication on the Rights of Women. And we're kind of pressed for time here, folks, but I'll just tell you, under this, she is basically saying that women have the same mental capacity as men. Women should be entrusted with the same political positions as men. A Vindication on the Rights of Women. Another individual here, I can remember seeing this in my dad's house many, many, many years ago, Edward Gibbon's The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire. It's a historical account here. Adam Smith, perhaps you've heard of him before, The Wealth of Nations. And that's an interesting piece too. All right, we're going to close out the class period here, folks. A popular individual at this time was an individual by the name of Cesare Beccaria. He was from the Italian peninsula, so he's an Italian. And he wrote this piece, which was called On Crimes and Punishment. And what he felt here was that if a person commits something wrong and that person is punished, then that person is generally punished as a resentment towards society. In other words, it's society's vengeance against the perpetrator of the crime. And what Cesare Beccaria is saying, let the punishment fit the crime. If we have somebody that's a pickpocket, and you don't have to cut the individual's hand off, You know, if the punishment doesn't serve a purpose, then don't deliver the punishment here. And he was a strong believer in not torturing any individual, and to reserve the death penalty, capital penalty, the death penalty, to only for the most serious of crimes. Because during these times we had these terrible, awful punishments, tortures that would take place of individuals. And I want to share some things with you for the remaining part of the class period. And this will probably take me, another 5, 6, 7 minutes here, folks. But it was not an uncommon practice at that time to break people on the wheel. And this is actually from a torture chamber in Germany. I took photographs of these instruments of torture there. And what you would do with an individual, it could be done in a couple of ways. You could actually strap an individual onto the wheel, bind the individual to a wheel, and then literally rotate the wheel, and this would go over like a bed of nails, and it would just rake the flesh off of the individual. Or better yet, what they would do, they would stake an individual out, and under the individual's long bones, such as the upper arms and the upper legs and even lower legs there, you would place wooden blocks under there. And then take this heavy wheel and drop it on the upper arm, on the humerus, or drop it on the upper leg there, the femur, and just crush the bones there. And you would literally crush all the bones in an individual's body there. They take the individual, strap them to the spokes of the wheel there, and just, their body is no more than a puppet. And just leave them there just until they agonize into death. Another structure here, which is the rack. You've probably heard of the rack before. That's an actual one that came from this period of time here, of the Enlightenment period, where people would be punished here. And that's what Cesare Beccaria was totally against. All right, I will share a couple of these with you, good folks here. And here's one here with the rack. And you can stretch an individual, 12 inches beyond their actual size there. It causes huge damage to the spinal column and will lead to death. Here's the one I was telling you about a few minutes ago here about rotating the individual on the wheel. Here, breaking the individual. Here's another view of that, showing you breaking an individual on the wheel here. Of course, we don't have that in our society today, thank goodness. Here's another means of torture of an individual called the heretic's fork. You can see how it's positioned here. It goes under the chin, and the other two prongs go down into the sternum itself here. And it's just an excruciating pain there. The heretic's fork. Here's one which is referred to as the breast ripper. Make sure that you place this down in the embers of a fire so you can get it red hot. And as the name implies here, it's used to rip the breast off, if you will. And this is punishment for heresy, for blasphemy, adultery. Terrible torture. Here's one which is referred to as a chair of spikes. Maybe you watched the Addams Family before. On the Addams Family they sometimes show this. That's an old show, by the way, there. But the chair of spikes. All right, the next one I want to show you here, these are referred to as the breaks, and this is for women that gossip, scolding women, gossiping women here, and it's like a mask that fits over the face. Let's see if I can see it here, and I don't see it right here, but it has a little, here it is. It has a device such as this that fits down into the mouth itself, so that if you even try to move the tongue around, it just rasps the musculature from the tongue. It's a wonderful cure for scolding wives. It's a wonderful cure, for nagging wives or gossiping wives. Likewise here. Thankfully, we don't see that sort of thing today. Here's one which is referred to as the Judas cradle. Judas cradle. I don't think you'll appreciate this very much. The individual is first stripped of their clothes. Now, notice here that we have a waistband, and the waistband goes around the waist itself. Notice the various ropes, and these ropes go off to the sides there where there are pulleys. So you have individuals in there that pull upon the ropes here, and it elevates the individual, it raises the individual up in the air, so you're kind of maneuvering the individual around. The idea is we're going to set the individual, you can use your own imagination here without clothes on, we're going to set that individual down on the peak here, the apex here of this pyramid. And why don't you have a little fun with this and just bounce the individual up and down a little bit too. So that's a Judas cradle and excruciating pain. Think you'll confess? You will confess. All right, here's another one here, which is referred to as the pair. Use your own imagination with this. This can be inserted orally, anally, or vaginally. And you place it into the orifice that I just mentioned right there. And then you turn this part. And this part rotates. And when it rotates, it causes this part here to expand, to go out, to expand like that. So you can imagine the damage that that would inflict in the places in which I described that it would be inserted. Here's one here which is referred to as the Iron Maiden. The Iron Maiden. Now you have to look closely at this. It has spikes that are inside here. So you take the person, the victim, to be tortured, and you lay that person in here, such as that, and then you just close the doors upon the individual, and these spikes penetrate the body itself, but they don't penetrate it into the vital organs that will cause a quick death. It causes an excruciating, extremely painful death with that. You will confess, I promise you. Uncle Fester on the Addams Family, this was his favorite one here. This is a head crusher. Now, to write the name out for you, this is a head crusher. And obviously the way it works here, the head is placed in this position here, just like it was a cantaloupe or whatever. And then it's cranked from the top here. And this causes this part here to go down upon the head here. And the skull is just crushed. Will you confess? You'll confess. That is right before you die anyway. Here's another one here, which is called the cat's paw. The cat's paw. Some people call it Spanish tickler here. It's missing a device on it. You have a little, like a broom handle that's down on this side here, and it's just, it's a wonderful back scratcher, if you can imagine what I'm talking about. Look at the illustration that's present over there. And you think you'll confess? I'll guarantee you that you will confess with that. All righty here, folks. Certainly not trying to advocate torture by any means, but just trying to add a little bit to the lecture here. But that's what was being used here in the 1700s, 16 and 1700s to force a confession. And with the use of such people on Crimes and Punishment, Caesarea Beccaria, we're going to find that most of the European nations will abolish torture. Not all, but most of them will abolish torture during that period here. So anyway, that's the Enlightenment period, the scientific revolution for you good folks here. We've been at it for about 42 minutes here, folks, so I think I'm going to stop for the time being here. And when we come back, we're going to wrap up this section here on the Enlightenment. It takes a few minutes. We still have to go through some of the musicians of that period of time anyway. And then we're going to get into a lecture which will take at least 2 full lectures, which deals with the French Revolution. One of my favorite periods of time during this course. All right, stay with material, learn your material here, folks. We've got that examination coming up. Hang it over your head very shortly. Okay, thank you.